What happens to your wealth if your child gets divorced? My client's son got divorced and suddenly his ex-wife's attorney was asking questions about assets the family had spent decades building. That was the moment my client realized something. He had spent his entire life protecting his wealth from taxes, business risks, and market downturns. But he had never stopped to ask, what happens after my kids inherit it? Because once wealth leaves your hands, the rules can change. And for many successful families, that's one of the biggest blind spots in their entire estate plan. If you've built meaningful wealth and plan to leave it to your children someday, this may be one of the most important conversations you'll ever have. Most successful families spend decades focused on building wealth, growing businesses, buying real estate, investing wisely, paying taxes, taking risks, making sacrifices. But very few spend the same amount of time thinking about what happens after that wealth transfers to the next generation. Because the assumption is usually, my kids will inherit it, problem solved. But what happens when life happens? What happens when your child gets divorced? What happens if they're sued? What happens if they experience financial difficulties? What happens if circumstances arise that nobody saw coming? What's surprising is that many families don't discover these risks until after an event has already happened. And by then, many planning opportunities that could have been considered years earlier are no longer available. I've had countless conversations with successful business owners who spent their entire careers protecting wealth while they were alive, only to realize they never created a plan for protecting it after it was transferred. The goal isn't simply passing wealth down. The goal is making sure your wishes continue long after you're gone. In the next few minutes, I'm going to explain why some families think differently about wealth transfers, what planning considerations often arise when multiple generations are involved, and why the way you leave wealth behind may be just as important as the amount you leave behind. Hi, I'm Todd Villarrubia. I'm a 30-year tax attorney with a master's degree in tax law, as well as a board-certified expert in estate planning and administration. I'm the founding partner of Wealth Planning Law Group and Fountainhead Global, our fractional family office. For decades, we've helped thousands of successful entrepreneurs, physicians, professionals, and business owners create estate, tax, asset protection, and wealth transfer strategies designed around their family's long-term goals. And one of the most important conversations we have with clients is not about growing wealth, it's about preserving it for future generations. Many families believe estate planning is simply deciding who receives what. A house goes here, an investment account goes there, the business goes to the kids. And while beneficiary designations and wills are important, they're often only the beginning of the conversation, because transferring wealth and protecting wealth are not always the same thing. Most people leave assets directly to their beneficiaries. It's simple, straightforward, and easy to understand. And for some families, that may be entirely appropriate. But families with significant assets often begin asking questions like, how will these assets be managed? What happens if circumstances change? How do we balance flexibility with long-term planning? How do we prepare future generations for stewardship? As wealth grows, planning often becomes less about distribution and more about structure, because structure can influence how assets are managed, how decisions are made, and how future generations interact with family wealth. That's why some families explore trust planning as part of their overall estate strategy. Not because they're trying to control their children, but because they're trying to create a thoughtful framework for the future. The families who tend to preserve wealth across multiple generations often approach estate planning differently. They don't simply ask who gets the money. They ask what happens to the money after it's received. How is it managed? How is it protected? How does it support future generations? Those are very different conversations, and they're often the conversations that create the greatest long-term impact. If you've built meaningful wealth and want to better understand how prepared your current plan may be for future generations, start by taking our complimentary Beast Risk Score. In just a few minutes, you'll receive an assessment designed to identify potential blind spots across your estate planning, tax planning, asset protection, and wealth transfer strategy. And if you'd like to discuss your family situation on a complimentary basis in more detail, you can also schedule a private consultation with our team. Click the link near this video to get started, because protecting wealth and transferring wealth are not always the same thing. And sometimes the most important planning decisions are the ones that affect generations you'll never meet.